Alien rage erupts. You imprisoned human kids? Are you crazy? Part 1 Ambassador Hannah Park smiled politely as the Vexian representative droned on about shipping routes and tariff adjustments. The conference room on Harmony Point Station was cold, like most spaces designed for multiple alien species. Hannah pulled her jacket tighter and nodded at the appropriate moments, though her mind wandered. She had been doing this job for 7 years now, and trade negotiations all started to sound the same after a while. The Vexian across the table was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes that never seemed to blink. His name was something complicated that Hannah could never quite pronounce correctly. He spoke in a monotone voice that made even exciting topics sound boring. Hannah glanced at her tablet, checking how much longer this session would last. Another hour at least. Ambassador Park, do you agree with the proposed changes to Section 7? The Vexian asked. Hannah looked up quickly. Yes, of course. The modifications seem reasonable. The Vexian nodded slowly and continued talking. Hannah made notes on her tablet, trying to look engaged. This was the unglamorous part of diplomacy that nobody talked about. Hours and hours of boring meetings, all to keep the peace between humans and the dozens of alien civilizations scattered across the galaxy. A soft chime came from her personal communicator. Hannah glanced down at her wrist. The message indicator showed it was encrypted and marked urgent. That was unusual. She held up one hand apologetically. Excuse me for just one moment, she said to the Vexian. I need to check this message. It might be an emergency. The Vexian looked annoyed but nodded. Hannah stepped out of the conference room into the corridor. She walked to a quiet corner and opened the encrypted message. Her heart started beating faster as she read the first few lines. The message was from someone claiming to be a Vexian defector. It included access codes and authentication that looked legitimate. Hannah's hands trembled slightly as she opened the attached files. What she saw made her stomach turn. The first file was a video. It showed a large room divided into small cells. In each cell was a human child. Hannah recognized them immediately as human, even though the video quality was not perfect. Some were sitting on beds staring at walls. Others were crying. A few were banging on the transparent barriers that kept them trapped. The second file was a document written in Vexian. Hannah's translator chip worked quickly, converting the text to readable English. It was a research proposal. The Vexian government had authorized a project to study human children. The goal was to understand how humans developed their unusual traits: resilience, adaptability, emotional bonds, and aggressive protectiveness. The document coldly described human children as subjects and specimens. It detailed how 23 children had been taken from remote human colonies over the past 6 months. The colonies were far from major trade routes, places where disappearances might not be noticed immediately. The children ranged in age from 13 to 17 years old. Hannah felt rage building inside her chest. She kept reading. The Vexians believed that by studying young humans during their developmental years, they could understand what made adult humans so dangerous. The report called humans primitive but potentially threatening, and suggested that early intervention might prevent humans from becoming a major galactic power. The third file was a schematic. It showed the layout of a hidden research facility on Vex Prime, the Vexian homeworld. The facility was underground, heavily guarded and completely isolated from the outside world. The children were being held there. Hannah closed the files and took several deep breaths. She needed to think clearly. This was bigger than anything she had ever dealt with before. If this information was real, if Vexian scientists had really kidnapped human children and were holding them prisoner, it would mean war. There was no question about it. No government on Earth or any human colony would tolerate this. She opened a secure channel to Fleet Admiral Daewon Kim. The connection took a few seconds to establish. When Daewon's face appeared on her communicator screen, he looked tired. He was probably dealing with some crisis or another. The man never seemed to sleep, Ambassador Park, Daewon said. This is unexpected. What can I do for you? Admiral, I need to speak with you immediately, Hannah said, keeping her voice low. In person if possible, or on the most secure channel you have. Daewon's expression changed. He sat up straighter. Give me 2 minutes, the screen went dark. Hannah waited, her mind racing. She walked back toward the conference room and apologized to the Vexian representative. I'm very sorry, but an urgent matter has come up. I need to postpone the rest of this meeting. The Vexian looked irritated but agreed. Hana gathered her things and hurried to her private quarters on the station. Her communicator chimed again. This time it was a full holographic connection. Daewon's image appeared in front of her, life-sized and three-dimensional. "Talk to me," Daewon said. Hana sent him the encrypted files. She watched his face as he reviewed them. The Admiral was famous for his calm demeanor. People joked that Daewon Kim could watch a star explode and just raise one eyebrow. But as he looked at the images of imprisoned children, Hana saw real emotion cross his face. Anger. Deep, cold anger. "How reliable is this source?" Daewon asked quietly. "I don't know yet," Hana admitted. "But the encryption and authentication codes check out. Whoever sent this had high-level access to Vexian systems." Daewon was silent for a long moment. He zoomed in on one of the images, studying a young girl sitting alone in a cell. The girl looked about 15 years old. She had her knees pulled up to her chest and was staring at nothing. 23 children, Daewon said. His voice was very quiet now. 6 months. "If this is real," Hana said carefully, "we need to be smart about how we respond. A direct accusation could make them move the children or worse. Or we could send the fleet to Vex Prime and demand their return," Daewon said. "That would be an act of war. They kidnapped our children. That's already an act of war." Hana understood his anger. She felt it too. But she also knew that rushing into a military confrontation could endanger the children even more. "Let me verify this information first. Give me 24 hours to confirm the source and see if we can gather more intelligence." Daewon nodded slowly. 24 hours. But Hana, if this is real, diplomacy is over. We're going to get those kids back, and it won't be pretty. The connection ended. Hana sat down heavily on her bed. Her hands were still shaking. She looked at the images again. All those young faces, scared and alone. Some of them had probably given up hope of ever seeing their families again. Far away on Vex Prime in the underground research facility, a teenage girl named Yuna Choi sat in her cell. She had been here for 3 months now. At first she had cried every day. She had screamed and begged and demanded to be released. The Vexian scientists had watched her with their cold, emotionless eyes and taken notes. Now Yuna had stopped crying. She had realized that showing emotion only made the scientists more interested. They wanted to study human feelings, human reactions, human breaking points. So Yuna had decided to show them nothing. She sat quietly during their tests. She answered their questions in a flat voice. She made herself as boring as possible. But inside Yuna was not broken. Inside she was planning. She had learned the patterns of the guards. She had memorized the layout of the facility. She had made friends with the other human prisoners, using a simple code of knocks and taps through the walls. They were all waiting for their chance. In the cell next to Yuna's, a boy named Taeyang Shin was doing something more active. Taeyang had always been good with computers and technology. During one of the psychological tests, he had been given access to a basic computer terminal. The scientists wanted to see how quickly humans could learn alien interfaces. What the scientists didn't know was that Taeyang was much smarter than they assumed. While pretending to struggle with the simple puzzles they gave him, he was actually mapping the facility's computer network. Every time they let him use a terminal, he learned more. He found security protocols, guard schedules, and communication systems. Taeyang didn't have a plan yet. But he was gathering information, and he knew that information was power. Sooner or later, he would find a way to use what he learned. He had to believe that. The alternative was giving up, and Taeyang refused to do that. Back on Harmony Point Station, Hana Park spent the rest of the day investigating. She contacted intelligence assets across the galaxy, asking careful questions without revealing what she knew. Slowly, she gathered more evidence. 3 human colonies had reported missing children over the past 6 months. Each colony had filed reports, but the disappearances had been treated as separate incidents. Nobody had connected them until now. By the end of the day, Hana was certain. The information was real. The Vexians had kidnapped 23 human children and were holding them prisoner. She opened another secure channel to Daewon. This time, when his image appeared, there were other people with him. She recognized Colonel Jun Lee, commander of the Terran Marines. There were several other officers she didn't know by name. "It's confirmed," Hana said without preamble. "The Vexians have our children." Daewon's jaw tightened. He looked at the officers around him. "Options?" Colonel Jun Lee spoke up. The 48 hours passed slowly. Vex Prime Ralter watched the countdown with amusement from his palace on the Vexian homeworld. The human ultimatum had been shared among the Vexian leadership, and most found it laughable. Humans were a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. They had no right to make demands of the Vexian collective, which had ruled this region of space for over 3,000 years. Ralter decided to make a public statement. He wanted the entire galaxy to see how he dealt with human arrogance. He recorded a message and broadcast it on all major communication channels, including those monitored by human colonies. "I have received demands from the human government," Ralter said, his translator converting his words into dozens of languages. "They claim that Vexian scientists have taken human children for research purposes. This is completely false. However, I understand that humans are an emotional species prone to irrational fears. I invite human representatives to visit our facilities anytime they wish. They will find nothing wrong." He smiled, showing small, sharp teeth. "Furthermore, I must remind humanity that making threats against the Vexian collective is unwise. We have maintained peace in this region for millennia. We will not tolerate aggressive behavior from newcomers." The message ended. Ralter leaned back in his chair, satisfied. He had denied everything and made humans look foolish. If they chose to attack based on false information, the other galactic powers would condemn them. If they backed down, they would look weak. Either way, Ralter won. What Ralter didn't understand was that he had just made the worst mistake of his life. On Earth, in the headquarters of the Terran Defense Force, Fleet Admiral Daewon Kim watched Ralter's statement with a group of senior officers. When it ended, the room was silent for a moment. Then Colonel June Lee spoke up. "He just called us liars on galactic television," June said quietly. "He also invited us to visit their facilities," another officer pointed out. "Maybe we should take him up on that." "Send inspectors," Daewon shook his head. "He knows we have evidence. He's betting we won't risk war over children he claims don't exist. He thinks we'll back down to avoid looking aggressive." He stood up and walked to the window. "He's wrong. So we're really doing this?" An officer asked. "We're going to war with the Vexian collective?" Daewon turned around. "They took our children. They lied about it. They're probably moving those kids right now to hide them somewhere else. Yes, we're going to war. But first I want to give the galaxy a chance to see the truth." He looked at Hana Park, who had traveled to Earth for the crisis meetings. "Ambassador, release everything. Every file, every image, every piece of evidence we have. I want it broadcast on every channel in the galaxy. Let everyone see what the Vexians have done." Hana nodded. She had prepared the data package already. Within minutes, it was spreading across the galactic communication network. Images of imprisoned children, documents detailing the research project, schematics of the hidden facility, audio recordings of Vexian scientists discussing their subjects. The response was immediate and chaotic. On human worlds, anger exploded. Millions of people demanded military action. Parents held their children closer and imagined the horror of having them stolen away. Within hours, protests erupted outside Vexian embassies and trade offices. Several were set on fire before police could intervene. On alien worlds, reactions were mixed. Some species expressed sympathy for humanity. Others remained neutral, unwilling to take sides in what might become a major war. A few species, particularly those who had been bullied by the Vexian collective over the centuries, quietly supported humanity's position. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Hana Park traveled immediately to their headquarters, a massive station orbiting a neutral star system. She arrived to find the council chamber in chaos. Hundreds of representatives from dozens of species were all trying to speak at once. The council chairman, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, finally restored order. "Ambassador Park, you have accused the Vexian collective of kidnapping human children. These are serious charges. What evidence do you present?" Hana stepped forward. She displayed the images on the large screens around the chamber. The room fell silent as representatives saw the children in their cells. She showed the documents, the schematics, the research proposals. She let the evidence speak for itself. When she finished, the Vexian representative stood up. He was not Ralter himself, but a diplomat named Krex. "These images are fabricated," Krex said smoothly. "Humans are known for their deceptive practices. This is clearly an attempt to manufacture a crisis to justify military aggression. Then let independent investigators visit the facility." Hana said. Right now. Without warning. Let them see for themselves, Krex hesitated. The location shown in these supposed schematics is a classified military research center. We cannot allow foreign powers to access it for security reasons. Because you're hiding kidnapped children there, Hana said flatly. Because we develop sensitive technology there, Krex countered. The debate went on for hours. In the end, the Galactic Council did exactly what Hana had feared. They voted to establish an investigative committee. The committee would study the evidence and make recommendations. The process would take weeks, possibly months. Hana stood up during the final vote. By the time your committee finishes its study, those children could be dead or moved somewhere we'll never find them. Humanity will not wait for bureaucratic procedures while our kids suffer. She walked out of the chamber. Behind her, she heard representatives erupting into argument again. It didn't matter. The Galactic Council had failed. Now it was up to the military. Deep in the research facility on Vex Prime, things were getting worse for the prisoners. Unichoi had been in isolation for 2 days now. The Vexian scientists had decided to test human psychological responses to loneliness. They had moved her to a smaller cell with no windows and minimal light. They fed her once a day and spoke to her only to ask questions about her emotional state. Yuna kept her answers short. I'm fine. Nothing. I don't know. She refused to give them the data they wanted. But inside she was struggling. The isolation was harder than she had expected. She had no way to know if the other prisoners were okay. She couldn't hear anything beyond her cell walls. She started counting seconds in her head to keep track of time. She did exercises to stay physically active. She recited poetry and stories she had memorized as a child. Anything to keep her mind occupied and prevent the loneliness from breaking her. In another part of the facility, Tae-Yang Shin had made a breakthrough. During another testing session, he had been given access to a more advanced computer terminal. The scientist wanted to see how quickly humans could adapt to complex alien systems. Tae-Yang pretended to struggle while actually diving deeper into the facility's network. He found the communication array. It was heavily encrypted, but Tae-Yang had been studying Vexian encryption for months now. He understood the basic patterns. During a moment when the scientists were distracted by another test subject, Tae-Yang quickly encoded a message and sent it through the array. The message was simple. Facility coordinates, number of prisoners, current status, and defensive capabilities. He didn't know if anyone would receive it. He didn't even know if it would get past the facility's firewalls. But it was the first real action he had been able to take, and it felt good. 3 hours later, a human listening post on the edge of Vexian space detected an unusual signal. The communications officer on duty almost dismissed it as background noise. But something about the encryption pattern caught her attention. It looked human. She ran it through decryption protocols. When the message decoded, she sat up straight and immediately sent it up the chain of command. Within minutes, it reached Fleet Admiral Daewon Kim. Daewon read the message 3 times. Then he called his senior staff together. We just received intelligence from inside the facility. One of the kids managed to send us a message. He displayed Tae-Yang's data on the main screen. The officer studied it carefully. Colonel Jun Lee pointed to the defensive specifications. This is good intel, real good. We can work with this. How reliable is it? Someone asked. It came from inside the facility, Daewon said, from one of our kids. I'd say it's very reliable. The deadline was approaching. In less than 6 hours, the 48 hours would be up. Daewon had hoped the Vexians would back down, return the children, and avoid bloodshed. But Ralter had made it clear that wouldn't happen. Daewon made his decision. He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Kim. Operation Homecoming is now active. I repeat, Operation Homecoming is now active. Execute your orders. Across human space, the military machine went into motion. The main battle fleet, already assembled and ready, began moving toward Vexian territory. Smaller strike groups positioned themselves along key routes. Supply ships loaded with ammunition and medical supplies departed from Earth and the major colonies, and in a hidden dock on a moon base, a special ship prepared for launch. The vessel was called the Silent Wind, and it was the most advanced stealth ship in the human fleet. Its captain was Subin Kang, a woman with 15 years of experience in covert operations. Subin stood on her bridge and looked at her. The Silent Wind drifted through space like a ghost. Captain Subin Kang stood on the bridge watching the tactical display. Vex Prime filled the screen ahead of them, a blue and green world surrounded by orbital stations and defense platforms. Any normal ship approaching this planet would have been detected hours ago. But the Silent Wind was not a normal ship. "Status report," Subin said quietly. "We're holding position at the edge of the orbital defense grid," her navigation officer reported. "No indication they've detected us. Stealth systems are operating at maximum efficiency." "Good. Begin final approach. Take us directly over the facility coordinates." The ship moved forward smoothly. Subin watched the defensive platforms pass by on the display. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a cruiser. If the Vexians detected the Silent Wind, they would all die within seconds. But the stealth technology held. The ship slipped past the defenses like water through a net. In the cargo bay, Colonel Jun Lee and his Marines were making final preparations. They wore black combat armor designed for close quarters fighting. Their weapons were loaded with non-lethal rounds for the initial breach. They didn't want to risk hitting any of the children with stray bullets. Jun checked his helmet display. The facility schematic from Tae Yang's message was loaded into every Marine's tactical system. They had studied the layout for 3 days, memorizing every corridor and room. They knew where the children were held. They knew where the guards would be stationed. They had planned for every contingency they could imagine. 5 minutes to drop, Subin's voice came through their helmets. "Weather conditions are clear. No aerial patrols detected in your landing zone." Jun activated his squad channel. "Listen up. We breach fast and hard. First squad secures the entrance. Second squad moves to the detention level. Third squad provides cover and handles any reinforcements. Remember, our priority is the kids. Everything else is secondary." "Questions?" "No, sir," came the responses. Good hunting. The Marines loaded into drop pods. Each pod was a small armored capsule designed to carry 1 or 2 soldiers from orbit to ground. They were fast, nearly impossible to track, and very uncomfortable. Jun climbed into his pod and sealed the hatch. The interior was cramped and dark except for the glow of his helmet display. "Drop pods launching in 3, 2, 1, execute," Subin announced. Jun felt the pod release from the ship. For a moment there was weightlessness. Then the pod's small thruster activated and he was pressed hard against the restraints. The pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Through his helmet, Jun could hear the roar of air rushing past. The drop lasted less than 2 minutes. Jun's pod slammed into the ground on top of the research facility. The impact was hard enough to knock the breath out of him. His training took over. He hit the release button and the pod hatch blew off with explosive bolts. Jun rolled out of the pod with his weapon ready. Around him, 11 other Marines were doing the same. They were on the facility's roof, exactly where they needed to be. The Vexians had never expected an attack from directly above. "Move," Jun ordered. The Marines ran to the roof access door. One Marine placed a breaching charge on the lock. The explosion was small but effective. The door blew inward and the team rushed through. Inside the facility, alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Vexian guards rushed toward the breach point, but they were too slow. The Marines moved with practiced efficiency. They flowed through the corridors like water, turning corners and clearing rooms in perfect coordination. The first group of guards appeared at the end of a hallway. They were armed but confused. They had been trained to defend against external attacks, not an assault team dropping onto their roof. The Marines opened fire with their non-lethal rounds. The projectiles hit the guards and delivered electric shocks that dropped them instantly. "First squad, entrance secured," came a report over Jun's helmet radio. "We have control of the main access point." "Copy that," Jun replied. Second squad moved to the detention level. Third squad set up defensive positions. The Marines split up according to plan. Jun led the second squad deeper into the facility. They descended 2 levels using an emergency stairwell. More guards appeared, and more guards fell to electric shock rounds. The Marines didn't slow down. They reached the detention level. Long corridors stretched in both directions, lined with transparent cells. Jun's heart sank when he saw them. Each cell held a human teenager. Most were sitting up now, awakened by the alarms. They looked terrified and confused. "This is Colonel Jun Lee of the Terran Marines," Jun announced loudly. "We're here to take you home. Stay calm and follow our instructions." In her cell, Yuna Choi couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Human soldiers here?" She pressed against the transparent barrier of her cell and saw armored figures moving down the corridor. They were really here. Someone had actually come for them. Tears started running down her face before she could stop them. After 3 months of being strong, of refusing to break, of maintaining hope against all odds, rescue had finally arrived. One of the Marines approached her cell with a device that looked like a scanner. "Stand back from the door, miss," he said gently. Una stepped back. The Marine attached something to the cell's locking mechanism. There was a brief flash of light and the door slid open. Una walked out on shaky legs. "Are you injured?" the Marine asked. "No," Una managed to say. "No, I'm okay." "Good, we're getting you out of here. Stay close to us." Up and down the corridor, Marines were opening cells. Children emerged, some crying, some too shocked to speak. A few looked like they didn't trust this was real. One boy, Taiyang Xin, walked up to June with a determined expression. "I'm Taiyang." "I sent the message," he said. June looked at the teenager with respect. "You did good work, son. That intelligence saved lives today." "Are we really getting out of here?" Taiyang asked. "Yes, all of you. I promise." A loud explosion echoed from somewhere above them. Third Squad had encountered heavier resistance. More Vexian guards were arriving, and these ones had real weapons, not just stun guns. "Sir, we need to move," one of the Marines said urgently. "They're bringing in reinforcements." June made a quick decision. "All squads, begin extraction. We're taking the direct route to the surface." The Marines formed a protective formation around the children. 23 rescued prisoners surrounded by 13 armored soldiers. They moved back toward the stairwell, but Vexian guards were already blocking that route. "Alternative exit," June ordered. "Blow the exterior wall." The Marines shepherded the children into a large room on the outer edge of the building. 2 Marines placed charges on the wall while others kept watch on the doors. The children huddled together in the center of the room, frightened but trying to stay calm. "Fire in the hole," a Marine announced. The explosion blew a massive hole in the wall. Daylight poured in along with fresh air. The children gasped. Most of them hadn't seen sunlight in months. Beyond the hole was a courtyard, and beyond that, open ground. "Move, move, move," June urged. The group climbed through the hole and dropped into the courtyard. It was about a 3-meter drop, manageable but not easy for the children. The Marines helped them down one by one. Una jumped and felt strong hands catch her and lower her safely to the ground. Alarms were blaring across the entire facility now. Vexian guards poured out of multiple exits. They opened fire with energy weapons. The Marines returned fire, their lethal rounds activated now that they were clear of the children. The courtyard erupted into chaos. "Silent Wind, we need extraction now," June called over his radio. "On approach," Subin responded. "ETA 90 seconds. The Marines formed a defensive circle around the children. Energy bolts flashed past them. One Marine took a hit to the shoulder and went down. Another Marine dragged him behind cover while a third took his position in the defensive line. Taeyang pulled Una down behind a concrete barrier. "Stay low," he said. "I know," Una replied, her heart pounding. They had come so close. They couldn't fail now. Commander Threx arrived at the courtyard with a full security team. He saw the Marines defending the human children and felt something unexpected: admiration. The human soldiers were outnumbered at least 3-1, but they fought with incredible ferocity. Every shot they fired hit a target. Their movements were coordinated and precise. Threx raised his weapon and aimed at one of the Marines. Then he hesitated. These soldiers had come here for their young. They had crossed into enemy territory, assaulted a fortified facility, and were fighting against overwhelming odds. All for children. He lowered his weapon slightly. What kind of species did that? What kind of civilization valued its offspring so much that it would risk war with a superior power? A shadow passed overhead. Threx looked up and saw something that shouldn't exist. A ship was descending, and his sensors hadn't detected it until now. The vessel was sleek and dark, almost invisible against the sky. The Silent Wind dropped into the courtyard with impossible grace. Its cargo ramp opened before it even touched the ground. Subin's voice boomed over external speakers. "Everyone on board now." The Marines pushed the children toward the ship. Una ran with the others, her legs pumping hard. Energy bolts crackled through the air around her. She reached the ramp and practically threw herself inside. Fleet Admiral Daewon Kim stood on the bridge of his flagship, the destroyer Indomitable. Around him, the human battle fleet hung in space like a promise of violence. 200 ships of various sizes, all armed, all ready. They had gathered at the edge of Vexian space while the Silent Wind completed its rescue mission. Now the children were safe. Now Daewon faced a decision that would shape humanity's future in the galaxy. His tactical officer spoke up. "Admiral, the Silent Wind has cleared Vexian space. All children are secured and healthy." "Good," Daewon said. "Send them back to Earth with a full escort. I want those kids home with their families as soon as possible." "Yes, sir." The bridge fell quiet. Everyone knew what came next. The children were rescued, but the people responsible for taking them were still free. Prime Ralter still ruled the Vexian collective. The scientists who had treated human children like laboratory animals still worked in their facilities. Nothing had been punished. Nothing had been prevented from happening again. Daewon's communication officer interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Vexian home fleet. They're demanding we withdraw from their space immediately or face military action." "How many ships do they have?" Daewon asked. "Sensors show 237 vessels. They're forming battle lines between us and Vex Prime." Daewon nodded slowly. The Vexians had a numerical advantage, and their ships were generally more advanced than human vessels. By any logical calculation, humanity should withdraw. They had their children back. Starting a full-scale war would be costly and dangerous. But Daewon was thinking about the images he had seen. Children in cells, teenagers subjected to psychological torture, families torn apart. And through it all, Vex Prime Ralter's arrogant assumption that humans were too weak or too afraid to do anything about it. "Open a channel to the Vexian fleet," Daewon ordered. His image appeared on screens throughout both fleets. Human sailors watched their admiral. Vexian commanders saw a human leader for perhaps the first time. "This is Fleet Admiral Daewon Kim of the Terran Defense Force," he began. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "You have demanded that we withdraw. I have a different proposal. Surrender Prime Ralter and all individuals responsible for the kidnapping and imprisonment of human children. They will face trial at the Galactic Council. Do this within the next hour, and we will withdraw peacefully." The Vexian response came quickly. A commander named Vex Admiral Korth appeared on screen. He looked like all Vexians, tall and thin with gray skin, but his expression showed something rare for his species. Anger. "You dare make demands after invading our sovereign territory?" Korth said. "You attacked a civilian research facility. You killed Vexian security personnel, and now you threaten our entire homeworld?" "We rescued kidnapped children from a prison," Daewon corrected. "We defended ourselves against those who tried to stop that rescue. And yes, now we are demanding justice. You have 1 hour. You are outnumbered and outgunned," Korth replied. "If you do not withdraw, we will destroy your fleet." Daewon smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. "You can try." The channel closed. On the bridge of the Indomitable, officers looked at each other nervously. They were really going to do this. They were really going to fight the Vexian collective. "All ships," Daewon broadcasted to his fleet. "Battle stations. Prepare for combat operations. We did not come here to start a war, but we will not walk away while those who hurt our children go unpunished. Today we send a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity protects its own. Always." Throughout the human fleet, crews rushed to their positions. Weapons powered up, shield generators hummed to life, fighter pilots climbed into cockpits. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone knew this might be their last battle. But not one person hesitated. On Earth, the rescue of the children was being broadcast live on every channel. Billions of humans watched as the Silent Wind docked at a space station. Medical teams rushed aboard. Cameras captured the moment when the first child, Yuna Choi, walked off the ship into the arms of her weeping parents. The images spread across the galaxy. Other species watched too. They saw the human families reunited. They saw the relief and joy in tears, and they began to understand something about humanity that they hadn't fully grasped before. Humans loved their offspring with an intensity that few other species could match. It wasn't just biological instinct. It was cultural, social, and deeply emotional. An attack on human children wasn't just a crime. It was an attack on the very heart of what made them human. Back in Vexian space, the hour deadline passed. Prime Ralter refused to surrender. He issued a statement calling the human demands absurd and offensive. He ordered Vex Admiral Korth to eliminate the human threat. The two fleets moved toward each other. The distance between them shrank from thousands of kilometers to hundreds. Weapon systems locked on, target solutions calculated. Every commander on both sides knew that once the first shot was fired, there would be no turning back. Vex Admiral Korth gave the order. All ships open fire. The Vexian fleet unleashed a massive barrage. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the human ships. On dozens of human vessels, alarms screamed warnings. Defensive systems activated automatically, but the human ships didn't sit still and take the hits. Every captain had studied Vexian tactics. They knew the Vexians preferred to fight at range, using their superior energy weapons to win battles before enemies could close distance. The Vexian way of war was methodical and calculated. Humans fought differently. All ships attack pattern Delta, Daewon ordered. Close the distance. Get inside their optimal firing range. The human fleet surged forward. Ship captains pushed their engines beyond recommended limits. They didn't fly in neat formations. They scattered and wove through space in patterns that seemed random but were carefully coordinated. The Vexian fire, aimed at where human ships should have been, mostly missed. A few hits landed and human vessels took damage, but not as much as the Vexians expected. Within minutes, the two fleets were mixing together in close combat. Now the human advantages showed. Their ships were tougher, built to take damage. Their crews were trained in aggressive tactics, and their captains fought with a fury that Vexian tactical computers couldn't predict. Captain Subin Kang, commanding from the Silent Wind now attached to a battle group, led her ships in a daring maneuver. They dove under the Vexian formation and came up behind 3 enemy cruisers. Before the Vexians could turn, Subin's group hammered them with missiles and railgun fire. 2 cruisers were disabled. The third retreated with heavy damage. Reform on my position, Subin ordered her group. Next target. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human commanders found weaknesses and exploited them ruthlessly. When Vexian ships tried to maintain distance, humans closed in. When Vexians tried to form defensive formations, humans broke them apart with aggressive strikes. Vex Admiral Korth watched in growing disbelief as his carefully planned battle fell apart. The humans weren't fighting the way they were supposed to. They took risks that no logical commander should accept. They threw themselves into danger to protect damaged ships. They refused to retreat even when outnumbered. How are they doing this? Korth asked his tactical officer. They're not following standard tactical doctrine, the officer replied, confused. They're fighting like they're angry. That was exactly right. The human fleet was angry. Every captain, every crew member, every pilot was thinking about those imprisoned children. They fought not just to win a battle, but to send a message. Ambassador Hannah Park, watching the battle from Earth, had begun broadcasting again. She released more evidence, more files, more images, not just to human audiences now, but to every species in the galaxy. She showed Vexian documents discussing how to prevent humans from gaining more galactic influence. She revealed conversations where Vexian leaders called humans useful primitives who should be kept in their place. The galactic reaction was explosive. Species who had been neutral suddenly weren't so neutral anymore. Several civilizations released statements condemning the Vexian collective. A few even offered military support to humanity, though Daewon politely declined. This was humanity's fight. The Galactic Council reconvened an emergency session. This time when Hannah spoke, every representative listened carefully. You see what is happening, Hannah said, gesturing to the battle footage playing on screens. Humanity did not want this war. We asked for diplomacy. We presented evidence. We gave opportunities for peaceful resolution. At every step, the Vexian collective chose arrogance over justice. Now you see the result. The Vexian representative Krex stood to speak. But before he could say anything, representatives from 3 other species stood up and walked out of the chamber. They were making a statement. They would not stand with the Vexians. More followed. Within minutes, the Vexian delegation sat almost alone. On Vex Prime, Prime Ralter watched the battle with growing horror. His fleet was being beaten. Worse, his political position was collapsing. The Galactic Council was turning against him. His own people were beginning to question his leadership. Commander Threx, who had returned from the research facility, entered Ralter's command center. Prime Ralter, I must speak with you, unless you have good news. 3 weeks after the battle, Yuna Choi stood in her childhood bedroom and felt like she was in a dream. Everything looked exactly the same as she remembered. her old posters on the walls, her books on the shelves, her comfortable bed with the blue blankets she had picked out when she was 12. But she felt different. She had changed in ways she was still trying to understand. Her mother knocked gently on the door. "Yuna, there's someone here to see you." Yuna went downstairs and found Ambassador Hana Park sitting in the living room. Hana stood up and smiled warmly when Yuna entered. "It's good to see you again," Hana said. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay," Yuna replied, sitting down. "Still getting used to being home." "That's understandable. You went through something terrible. It's normal to need time to adjust." Yuna looked at her hands. "I have nightmares sometimes. About being back in that cell. Have you been talking to the therapist we arranged?" "Yes, they help." Yuna looked up at Hana. "Why are you here?" "I mean, I'm happy to see you, but you're an ambassador." "You must be busy," Hana smiled. "I wanted to check on all of you personally. The 23 children who were taken. You're the reason this whole thing happened. I wanted to make sure you're okay." "We're famous now," Yuna said quietly. "People recognize us on the street. They call us heroes, but we didn't do anything heroic. We just survived." "Surviving takes courage," Hana said gently. "And you did more than survive. Taeyang sent that message that helped the rescue team. You kept the other children's spirits up. Several of the other kids have told me that you helped them stay strong." Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. "I was so scared. Every single day I was terrified. But you didn't let the fear break you. That's what courage really is. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it." They talked for another hour. Hana answered Yuna's questions about what had happened after the rescue. The battle, the surrender, the trials that were now beginning at the Galactic Council. When Hana finally left, Yuna felt a little lighter. Talking about it helped. Across the city, Taeyang Xin sat in a classroom at the Terran Space Academy. He had been given a full scholarship after the rescue, recognizing his technical skills. Around him, other students studied navigation and engineering. They were all older than Taeyang, but none of them treated him like a kid. They had all seen the news. They knew what he had been through. An instructor approached Taeyang's workstation. "How are you doing with the advanced encryption course?" "It's easier than the Vexian systems I hacked," Taeyang said without thinking. Then he looked up, worried he sounded arrogant, but the instructor just smiled. "I believe it. Your admission file says you broke into a military facilities network using nothing but a basic terminal. That's impressive work." "I had to do something," Taeyang said, sitting in that cell waiting for rescue. It felt better to take action, even if it was risky. "That's the attitude that makes a good officer," the instructor said. "Initiative and courage. Keep that mindset." After class, Taeyang met up with 3 of the other rescued children. They had formed a close bond, these survivors. They understood each other in ways that nobody else could. They met regularly, helping each other process what they had been through. Today they were meeting Yuna at a cafe near the academy. When she arrived, they all greeted her warmly. They talked about normal things, classes, friends, plans for the future. But eventually the conversation turned to what they had experienced. "I got recognized at the store yesterday," one of the others said. "A woman asked for my autograph. It felt weird. People see us as symbols," Yuna said. "Symbols of why the war was justified. They need us to be heroes, are we though?" Another asked. "Heroes? We're survivors," Taeyang said firmly. "That's enough." At the Galactic Council headquarters, the trial of Prime Ralter was underway. The former Vexian leader sat in a detention field, surrounded by guards from multiple species. Hundreds of representatives watched as evidence was presented. Ambassador Hana Park testified about her investigation. She showed the images, the documents, the communications. Every piece of evidence was examined carefully. Ralter's defense attorneys argued that he had been misled by his scientific advisors, that he hadn't fully understood what was happening at the facility. But then Commander Threx testified. The Vexian military officer had been granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation. He told the truth about how the project had been approved at the highest levels, how Ralter had personally authorized the kidnappings, how the Prime had dismissed concerns about ethics and morality. Prime Ralter believed humans were inferior, Threx said to the assembled council. He thought studying their children would give us insight into their weaknesses. He never considered that it might be wrong. He never imagined they would fight back so effectively. The trial lasted for 2 weeks. In the end, the verdict was unanimous. Ralter was found guilty of crimes against sapient beings. He was sentenced to 30 years in a neutral prison facility. His scientific advisors received similar sentences. When the verdict was announced, humans across the galaxy felt a sense of justice. Not revenge exactly, but accountability. The message was clear: you cannot harm children and escape consequences. The Vexian collective underwent major changes. A new government formed, led by reformers who wanted to repair relations with humanity and other species. They issued a formal apology to all the families affected. They paid significant reparations, and they opened their borders to inspection, proving they had shut down all similar research programs. Commander Threx became an unexpected bridge between humans and Vexians. He visited Earth as part of a diplomatic delegation. While there, he asked to meet some of the rescued children. The request was unusual, but Yuna, Taiyang, and several others agreed. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room. Threx stood before the teenagers, looking uncomfortable. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Threx broke the silence. "I want to apologize," he said. "I was the commander of the facility where you were held. I followed orders, but that's not an excuse. I should have questioned what we were doing. I should have refused. I'm sorry for what happened to you." Yuna studied the Vexian officer. She could see genuine regret in his large black eyes. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why did your people think it was okay to treat us like that?" Threx considered the question carefully. "We didn't see you as people." "Not really. We saw you as subject specimens. We convinced ourselves that we were doing important research. We ignored the fact that you were children who missed their families." "And now?" Taiyang asked. "Now I understand that we were wrong. Completely wrong. During the rescue, I watched your soldiers risk their lives for you. I saw the determination in their eyes. And I realized that humans have something most species have lost or never had." "What's that?" "The absolute commitment to protect your young, no matter the cost. Most species in the galaxy have regulations about child rearing. They have rules and procedures. But humans?" Threx shook his head. "Humans have love. Raw, fierce, uncompromising love. It makes you strong in ways we never anticipated." The teenagers didn't know what to say to that. Finally, Yuna spoke. "Thank you for being honest, and for helping stop the war." "It was the least I could do," Threx said. The diplomatic relationship between humans and Vexians slowly improved. It would take generations to fully heal the wounds, but both sides were making efforts. Trade resumed. Cultural exchanges began. Vexian students even started attending human universities, learning about the species they had underestimated. But the real changes happened across the entire galaxy. Other species took notice of what had happened. They saw that humanity was not a species to be dismissed or underestimated. More importantly, they saw that humans would go to extreme lengths to protect their most vulnerable members. New treaties were proposed at the Galactic Council. Laws protecting children of all species from exploitation. Regulations governing research on sapient beings. Human diplomats pushed for these changes, and this time, other species listened. Colonel Jun Lee received the Star of Valor, the highest military decoration in the Terran Defense Force. He accepted it on behalf of his entire rescue team. At the ceremony, he gave a short speech. "We didn't do anything special," Jun said. "We did what any human would do. We protected our children. That's not heroism. That's just who we are." The crowd applauded, but Jun's words resonated beyond the ceremony. They spread across the galaxy, repeated and discussed by countless species. "That's just who we are." It became a phrase associated with humanity, a summary of their character. Fleet Admiral Daewon Kim stood down from active duty 6 months after the battle. He had achieved his goal. The children were safe. The perpetrators faced justice. Reforms were in place. It was time to let someone else lead. On his last day in office, he received a message. It was from all 23 of the rescued children. They had recorded a video together, each of them saying a few words. They thanked him. They told him what they were doing now. They assured him that they were healing, moving forward, building good lives. Daewon watched the video alone in his office. When it ended, he allowed himself a few tears. Not tears of sadness, but of relief. They were okay. The children were okay. Everything else had been worth it for that.